Some stones are so massive, so perfectly fitted, and so precisely aligned that they still make the modern world pause, long before cranes, engines, laser levels, or computer models. Ancient builders moved blocks the size of houses, shaped walls that survived earthquakes, and aligned temples with the sun and stars. But the real mystery is not whether humans could build them. The deeper question is what kind of world made them capable of this. Before we go deeper, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if this is the kind of history and mystery you enjoy. Tonight, we step into the hidden story of ancient megastructures built with impossible precision. The stone is too large for the imagination before it is too large for the hand. It sits under the sun with the patience of a mountain, squared, lifted, fitted, and left behind by people whose names have mostly vanished. Around it, the modern world arrives with cameras, measuring tools, dust on its boots, and the strange confidence of machines. Yet the stone does not explain itself. Its edges still meet another stone with a closeness that seems almost deliberate beyond reason. Its weight presses into the earth like a question. Its surface bears the faint marks of tools, weather, repair, and time, but not enough to make the whole story easy. Someone once stood here before engines, before steel cranes, before computer models, before laser levels, and decided that raw earth could be persuaded into order. This is where the mystery begins. Not in fantasy, but in the stubborn physical fact of ancient work. A wall in the Andes bends through polygonal blocks that seem less stacked than grown together. A pyramid on the Giza Plateau holds its enormous geometry against the desert horizon with an accuracy that still startles surveyors. At Baalbek, stones the size of small houses lie cut from bedrock or locked into platforms, so heavy that even describing them makes the mind reach for explanations outside ordinary life. On Salisbury Plain, upright stones watch the movement of the sun through seasons of mist and frost. In Malta, in Egypt, in Peru, in Mexico, in Cambodia, in Lebanon, in places separated by oceans and centuries, ancient builders leave behind structures that appear at first glance to be impossible, and then, on closer inspection, become something more interesting than impossible. They become evidence of human persistence at a scale that modern instinct often underestimates. Before we go deeper, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if this is the kind of history and mystery you enjoy, because the deeper one looks into these stones, the more the mystery changes shape. It is not simply a matter of asking how people moved heavy blocks. That is the obvious question, and it matters. But beneath it are quieter questions. How did they measure straight lines across uneven ground? How did they keep angles consistent when their tools were made of wood, cord, stone, copper, bronze, or iron? How did they organize workers for years, sometimes generations, without losing the plan? How did they make architecture serve the sky, the king, the dead, the gods, the calendar, the city, and the memory of a people all at once? The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate many details. But one thing is clear: precision in the ancient world was never only technical. It was social, political, ritual, and deeply human. The first sensation these monuments produce is often disbelief. A visitor stands at the foot of the Great Pyramid and feels the scale before understanding the numbers. The pyramid is not merely tall, it is an artificial horizon, a mountain of worked limestone, once covered in smooth casing stones that would have caught sunlight with a pale, almost blinding surface. Its base was laid out with extraordinary care, and although time, quarrying, and damage have altered what survives, the underlying achievement remains severe and commanding. Nothing about it suggests accident. Nothing about it suggests a pile of stones gradually finding a shape. It is planned. it is oriented, it is governed by measurement. Yet the closer one gets, the less useful the word impossible becomes. The blocks are not magical, they are quarried stone. The marks of work survive. The remains of workers' settlements, bakeries, administrative systems, and tool traditions surround some of these monuments like the ghost of the living world that produced them. At Giza, the pyramid is not an isolated miracle dropped into the desert. It belongs to a landscape of quarries, tombs, causeways, temples, harbours, roads, and human logistics. The wonder does not shrink when this is understood. It grows heavier. It means that the monument was not built by a single secret, but by a civilization capable of turning food, labour, belief, geometry, and authority into stone. Still, there are places where explanation comes slowly. At Sacsayhuaman, above Cusco, great stones locked together with irregular edges so closely matched that the walls seem to deny the ordinary weakness of masonry. The stones are not equal rectangles. They are many-sided forms, each shaped to its neighbours, each resting in a system that has endured earthquakes in one of the most restless mountain regions on Earth. The Inca did not use mortar in these walls, yet the joints remain tight. Scholars can describe hammerstones, abrasion, trial fitting, ramps, levers, and the organisation of skilled labour, but no single explanation fully accounts for the full-lived process, hour by hour, block by block, decision by decision. The ancient builder's hand is present, but the ancient builder's voice is mostly gone. This loss of voice is one reason modern people so often reach for extraordinary theories. When a monument survives but its builders do not speak plainly to us, imagination rushes into the silence. It is tempting to say that the work was beyond human ability, especially when the people who made it lived without modern machines. But that temptation reveals more about modern assumptions than ancient limitations. Human beings have always been toolmakers, observers, organisers, and dreamers. They have also always been capable of doing difficult things when belief, necessity, hierarchy, and patience are joined together. The mystery is not that ancient people could build with precision. The mystery is how many different societies, under different skies, found their own pathways toward precision using what the earth and their traditions gave them. Precision itself has many meanings. Sometimes it is mathematical, a line oriented toward a cardinal direction, or a monument aligned with a solstice sunrise. Sometimes it is structural, a wall built to survive shaking ground, or a canal sloped gently enough to carry water across distance without destroying itself. Sometimes it is visual, the deliberate placement of a temple so that a ruler, a mountain, a river, and the heavens appear bound into one order. Sometimes it is psychological. A perfectly fitted stone tells anyone who sees it that power has been made visible, that disorder has been defeated, at least for a moment, by human will. In the ancient world, such precision was never casual. It cost bodies. It cost seasons. It required quarrymen waking before heat became unbearable, rope makers twisting fibre, scribes counting rations, priests reading the sky, surveyors stretching cords, haulers dragging weight over prepared roads, and rulers willing to spend wealth on monuments whose full meaning may have been as much eternal as practical. What survives in the record suggests not only genius, but repetition. The same gestures performed again and again, the same measurements checked and corrected, the same lessons passed from older hands to younger ones until a craft became so refined that later ages mistook it for a lost power. And yet, the stones keep their last reserve of silence. Even when archaeology explains the quarry, the labour force, the tools, the food supply, and the political system, something remains difficult to grasp: the mental world in which such work felt necessary. Modern people build upward for profit, speed, density, and display. Ancient builders often built for eternity, for ancestors, for gods, for cosmic order, for the dead king's transformation, for the living ruler's legitimacy, for the calendar that told farmers when to sow and priests when to perform rites. A stone set precisely in place could be more than construction. It could be an argument that the world itself had a pattern and that human hands could join it. So the first mystery is not a single monument, it is a pattern of ambition. Across deep time, societies with limited machines but immense discipline learn to command stone, water, earth, and horizon. They made landscapes speak in geometry. They made weight rise. They made walls breathe through earthquakes. They made tombs face stars. Temples catch the sun. Roads cross mountains. And platforms hold the memory of vanished power. The ruins stand now under open skies, stripped of paint, ceremony. Music, labour, fear, and command. They look still, but they are not still at all. They are the remains of movement frozen into form, and every fitted joint, every level foundation, every impossible block asks the same quiet question, not whether ancient people were capable, but what kind of world made them capable of this? Long before the first pyramid rises from the Egyptian desert, before the first imperial road is paved across mountains, before kings can command armies of masons with written orders and measured rations, human beings are already learning how to make the earth remember them. The first great structures do not begin as monuments in the later sense. They begin as chosen places, a ridge where animals pass, a spring that never dries, a cave mouth turned toward winter light, a hilltop from which the horizon opens like a circle. At first, the built world is small shelters of wood, bone, hide, reed, and packed earth, repaired season after season, shaped by weather and habit more than grand design. But somewhere in deep prehistory, people begin to do something stranger. They return to certain places not merely to live, but to gather, bury, feast, watch, mark, and remember. This is one of the quiet revolutions behind ancient precision. It does not begin with machines. It begins with attention. A community notices that the sun returns to a particular notch in the hills at the same time each year. It notices that the dead, when placed in the ground with care, transform ordinary soil into ancestral ground. It notices that a stone set upright can outlast a wooden post, and that a line of posts or stones can guide the eye, divide space, and give invisible beliefs a physical edge. What survives in the record suggests that the earliest builders were not simply solving engineering problems. They were creating fixed points in a world of movement. Many of these early works are gone because their materials were perishable. Timber rots, reed collapses, mud walls melt back into the ground, and the light frames of ancient shelters leave only stains in soil or patterns of post holes. Archaeologists often have to read these traces like shadows. A ring of darker earth may be the ghost of a wooden circle. A patch of burned bone may mark a feast. A burial beneath a floor may reveal that a house was not only a place of sleep, but a vessel of family memory. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate how much ritual, status, astronomy, and daily necessity can be separated in such early settings. The difficulty is that ancient life did not divide the world as neatly as modern categories do. Shelter, ceremony, food, death, and power could exist in the same packed earth floor. The great surprise is that monumentality appears earlier than older generations of scholars once expected. In southeastern Anatolia, at Göbekli Tepe and related sites, massive carved T-shaped pillars stand in circular or oval enclosures, some decorated with animals, belts, arms, and abstract signs. These stones belong to communities that lived before the full rise of farming village life in the region, or at least during its earliest transformations. That fact unsettles a simple old story. The story that agriculture comes first, then settled villages, then temples. Here, the order appears more complicated. Gatherings, ritual labour, and shared belief may have helped pull people toward new forms of social life, not merely followed after them. No single explanation fully accounts for these sites, but they show that large-scale building could emerge from hunter-gatherer or transitional communities when the social reason was powerful enough. The pillars at such places are not precise in the way a pyramid casing joint is precise, yet they reveal another kind of precision, the repeated shaping of symbolic space. Stones are selected, cut, transported, erected, and arranged according to patterns that matter to the builders. Their surfaces are carved with animals that seem alert and dangerous: foxes, boars, birds, snakes, creatures that belong to a living landscape of fear and dependence. The builders are not merely stacking weight. They are fixing a world of signs into limestone. They are giving memory a body, and because the stones are heavy, because they require cooperation, the act of building itself may have been part of the meaning. The monument is not only the finished structure, it is the gathering required to make it. This is where precision first becomes social. A single person can build a shelter. A group must build a monument. The moment people agree that a stone must stand in one place rather than another, that a pit must be dug to a certain depth, that posts must form a circle rather than a scatter, they are practicing shared measurement. Not measurement in the modern laboratory sense, but measurement as coordinated intention. A cord stretched between hands, a repeated pace across ground. A sight line toward the horizon, a memory of where last year's shadow fell, a master of ritual or craft saying, in effect, that this is the place, this is the line, this is the correct relation between earth, sky, and community. Lesser-known traces of this early discipline appear in many forms. Some prehistoric structures were rebuilt again and again on the same footprint, suggesting that the exact placement mattered across generations. In parts of Neolithic Europe, long barrows and chambered tombs were not random heaps of stone and earth, but carefully oriented spaces where the living could enter, deposit remains, rearrange bones, and return. In some houses of the Near East, skulls of the dead were removed, plastered, painted, and kept in ways that seemed deeply intimate and strange to modern eyes. These were not megastructures in size, yet they reveal the same underlying impulse to resist disappearance by making form out of memory. The rise of planned building also depends on a changing relationship with time. A portable camp belongs to a season. A monument belongs to generations. Once people invest labour in something too heavy to move, they are making a claim about return. They expect descendants, or at least future visitors, to recognise the place. They expect ceremonies to repeat. They expect stories to attach themselves to stone. Precision, then, is not only about perfect angles. It is about fidelity across time. The second stone must answer the first. The rebuilt wall must honour the older wall beneath it. The burial chamber must remain aligned with an entrance whose meaning may have been known to everyone present and lost to everyone later. Out of this long prelude, the later wonders become less sudden. The pyramids, stone circles, ziggurats, temples, causeways, and mountain terraces do not appear from nowhere. They rise from deep habits of watching, remembering, gathering, and marking the land. Ancient builders inherit not only tools, but ways of thinking with space. They learn that a monument can gather people even before it is complete, that labour can create identity, that precision can make authority feel natural, and that stone can hold a belief longer than a voice can carry it. Before machines, before certainty, before written blueprints, the human hand is already measuring the world against the invisible shapes of meaning. Once people learn that a place can be made sacred by returning to it, the next step is to make the landscape itself participate. A stone no longer stands only as a marker of memory. It becomes a point in a larger design. A burial mound faces a dawn. A passage grave catches a blade of winter sunlight. A ring of posts or stones frames the horizon at the moment when the year seems to turn. The earth is still uneven, the tools still simple, and the builders still work with hands, ropes, stakes, antler picks, wooden levers, stone mauls, and patient eyes. But the ambition has changed. Architecture is no longer just a shelter for bodies or a chamber for the dead. It becomes a way of measuring time. This kind of precision is subtle because it does not always look like engineering at first. A modern viewer may see only a circle of weathered stones in grass, or a mound with a dark opening, or an avenue of uprights leading nowhere obvious. Yet these structures often make sense only when the sky is included. The builders are working not on blank ground, but inside a moving dome of light. Sunrise shifts along the horizon. Moonrise wanders through its longer cycle. Shadows shorten, lengthen, disappear, and return. Stars rise and set in patterns that can be watched for generations. To societies without printed calendars or mechanical clocks, the heavens are not decoration, they are order made visible. At Newgrange in Ireland, a passage tomb built more than 5,000 years ago is aligned so that, around the winter solstice, sunlight enters a carefully placed roof box above the doorway and reaches deep into the passage. For most of the year, the inner chamber rests in darkness. Then, briefly, in the cold part of the year when the sun seems weakest, light returns to the heart of the mound. The effect is not accidental in any simple sense. It required careful placement, repeated observation, and a knowledge of how a small opening could control light across a long stone corridor. Scholars still debate the full meaning of this event, whether it was tied to rebirth, ancestry, seasonal renewal, elite ritual, or ideas now beyond recovery. But the physical fact remains. The builders made a monument that waits for a particular dawn. That waiting is part of its power. Ancient precision often works slowly. It is not always visible on the day the last stone is placed. It reveals itself when a season arrives, when a shadow touches a mark, when a procession moves along a prescribed path, when the living enter a chamber where the dead have already become part of the architecture. In such places, stone behaves almost like memory with a schedule. It keeps an appointment across centuries. Stonehenge, on Salisbury Plain, is perhaps the most famous example, but its fame can obscure its strangeness. It was not built all at once as the clean monument imagined in tourist silhouettes. It developed through phases over many centuries, beginning with earthworks and timber or stone settings before the great sarsen stones and smaller bluestones were arranged. Its main axis is associated with the solstice line, especially the summer sunrise and winter sunset. The monument also belongs to a wider ritual landscape of avenues, burial mounds, timber circles, and nearby settlements. What survives suggests that Stonehenge was never a lonely ring in an empty field. It was part of a broad, living geography of movement, death, gathering, and seasonal attention. The lesser-known detail is that some of the stones came from far away. The bluestones are linked to sources in Wales, meaning that people transported heavy stones across a considerable distance long before roads in the later engineered sense. Exactly how they moved them remains debated. They may have used sledges, rollers, waterways, labour teams, or routes more complex than any single model can restore. But even if every practical step were reconstructed, the deeper question would remain: why those stones? From that far away? For this place the evidence remains incomplete. Yet the effort itself suggests that the material carried meaning. A stone could belong to a distant landscape and still be made to stand in a new one, bringing with it the memory, power, or identity of its source. The geometry of sacred ground does not require perfect circles in the modern mathematical sense. It requires repeatable relationships, a line of sight, a center, a boundary, a controlled entrance, a path that changes the body's experience as it approaches the monument. Many prehistoric earthworks are as much about movement as appearance. A person walking along an avenue, climbing a mound, entering a passage, or circling a ring experiences space in stages. The builders shape expectation. They hide and reveal. They compress the body into darkness and then release it into light. This is architecture as a guided experience, and its precision is felt in the timing of the journey. In Malta, the megalithic temples show another expression of ordered sacred space. Massive stone structures with curved chambers, decorated surfaces, and carefully arranged interiors rise on islands that had no vast empire behind them. Their builders lived in small communities, yet they created monuments older than many famous civilizations. The temple's plans are not random accumulations of stone. They show repeated forms, controlled entrances, and spaces that may have shaped ritual practice in ways now difficult to reconstruct. Some contain evidence of animal sacrifice, figurines, decorated altars, and patterns of use that hint at ceremonies tied to fertility, ancestors, or community identity. No single explanation fully accounts for them, but their existence shows again that precision does not require an empire. It requires shared purpose. This is one of the most important corrections to the modern imagination. People often assume that technical precision must come from advanced machinery or centralized states, but prehistoric monuments show that careful building can emerge wherever long observation, skilled craft, and communal motivation come together. A society may lack writing and still keep a calendar in stone. It may lack metal tools and still shape a passage toward a solstice dawn. It may lack kings and still organize labor through kinship, ritual obligation, seasonal gatherings, or belief strong enough to pull people across distances. The cost of such work is easy to underestimate. Every stone lifted into place represents not only physical effort, but coordination. Someone has to choose the site. Someone has to remember the alignment. Someone has to quarry or collect the material. Someone has to feed the workers, manage disputes, repair mistakes, and decide when the work is correct. In a small community, the builders are not anonymous labor in the way they may become under later states. They are relatives, neighbors, ritual participants, perhaps rivals bound together by obligation. The monument grows out of their social world and then outlives it. By the time the first great kingdoms rise, sacred geometry is already ancient. The idea that stone can bind earth to sky has been tested for thousands of years. Later rulers will enlarge it, sharpen it, command it with bureaucracy, cover it with inscriptions, and turn it toward royal immortality. But the foundation is older than crowns. It begins with people watching the horizon, setting a marker, returning the next year, correcting the line, and teaching the young that the world has hidden rhythms. The great age of pyramids and temples will inherit this patient attention. It will make the geometry larger, more disciplined, and more political. Yet beneath the polished casing stones and royal monuments to come, there remains the older human gesture, a hand placing stone against sky, hoping the alignment will hold. The older habit of setting stone against sky reaches one of its most severe forms on the Giza Plateau, where the desert does not flatter the builder. It exposes everything. Lines have nowhere to hide. A mistake in the foundation would travel upward through millions of blocks. A small error in orientation would become a permanent argument with the horizon. Yet there, above the Nile floodplain, the Great Pyramid rises with a calm that seems almost unnatural. Its ruined outer surface still holding the memory of a shape once far sharper, smoother, and more blinding than what survives today. The monument now appears as a stepped mass of weathered limestone, but in its finished state it was probably faced with fine white casing stones, each carefully dressed, each part of a vast geometric skin that turned the pyramid into a controlled meeting of earth, sunlight, and royal eternity. The pyramid problem begins with its simplicity. A pyramid is easy to imagine. It is painfully difficult to execute at this scale. The base must be laid out with extraordinary care. The corners must hold their relation. The sides must climb at a consistent angle. The weight must settle without tearing the structure apart. The passages and chambers must be placed inside the mass without the whole project becoming a tomb for its own builders. The Great Pyramid is not the first pyramid in Egypt. And that matters. It belongs to a long experimental tradition, from mastaba tombs to step pyramids to earlier true pyramids, where ambition sometimes outran technique. Before Giza, Egyptian builders already know failure, adjustment, collapse, and redesign. The monuments of the 4th dynasty are not miracles without ancestry. They are the result of accumulated trial. Still, accumulation does not make them ordinary. The Great Pyramid was built for Khufu, a king whose living personality is almost hidden behind the monument that bears his name. Its estimated original height was about 146 meters, and its base covered more than 13 acres. The number of blocks is often given in the millions, though exact counts vary because the inner structure is not simply a uniform stack. Some blocks are relatively manageable by ancient standards. Others, especially granite beams used in the internal chambers, are far heavier and came from Aswan far to the south. What survives in the record suggests not a single engineering trick, but a whole chain of operations: quarrying, transport, levelling, measuring, hauling, lifting, fitting, provisioning, and administration, all repeated until a mountain had been made from decisions. The levelling alone is astonishing. The builders had to prepare a base over a broad natural rock surface, working with the plateau rather than against it. They may have cut channels, used water levels, sighting instruments, cords, plumb bobs, and careful surveying methods known in principle from later Egyptian practice. Scholars still debate the exact techniques used to orient the pyramids so closely to the cardinal directions. Some propose observations of circumpolar stars. Others suggest solar shadow methods or combinations of both. The exact procedure is not preserved in a builder's manual, and the evidence remains incomplete. But the result shows that Egyptian surveyors possessed a disciplined practical astronomy. They did not need modern compasses to find order in the sky. They needed repeated observation, stable reference points, and a culture that valued correct orientation as part of sacred kingship. Then there are the casing stones. Today, most are gone, stripped in later periods for building material, leaving the rougher core exposed. But where casing survives on some pyramids, and where fragments and traces remain, it reveals a level of surface finishing that changes the whole monument. The pyramid was not meant to look like a giant staircase. It was meant to be a shining, continuous form. Fitting those casing stones required more than brute force. It required planning from the base upward, constant correction, and a refined understanding of angle. A tiny deviation repeated across the face could distort the final apex. The builders had to think simultaneously in individual stones and in the complete shape. The popular imagination often turns immediately to ramps, because at some point the stones must rise. Ramps almost certainly played some role, but what kind remains one of the most persistent debates in Egyptian archaeology. A straight external ramp would become enormous at full height, consuming staggering amounts of material. A zigzag ramp, spiral ramp, internal ramp, or combination of systems may solve some problems while creating others. Evidence for ramps exists at various Egyptian sites. And traces near pyramids show that builders used inclined planes in different contexts. But no single ramp model fully accounts for every stage of the Great Pyramid's construction. The problem is not whether ancient Egyptians could use ramps. They could. The harder question is how they adapted their lifting system as the pyramid grew, as working space narrowed, and as precision became more difficult near the top. The granite inside the pyramid deepens the puzzle. Heavy beams above the king's chamber were brought from Aswan, hundreds of kilometers away, likely moved along the Nile when water levels allowed transport. These stones are not casual additions. They show that the builders could coordinate distant quarrying with river logistics and final placement deep within the rising structure. Copper tools, dolerite pounding stones, wooden sledges, ropes, lubricated tracks. And human teams belong to the world of plausible technique. Yet plausible does not mean easy. It means that the extraordinary result emerges from ordinary materials driven to their limits by organization. One lesser-known detail is that the pyramid sits within a much larger machine of sacred landscape. It is tied to mortuary temples, causeways, subsidiary pyramids, boat pits, cemeteries, quarries, and worker areas. The so-called pyramid is only the most visible part of a royal complex designed to transform death into cosmic order. The king's body, the rising sun, the northern stars, the Nile, the desert edge, and the labour of the living all meet in one landscape. Precision here is theological as much as technical. The monument declares that the king's passage into eternity is not improvised. It is measured. And still, the pyramid withholds its final simplicity. It is tempting to seek one answer, one ramp, one hidden method, one lost device, one secret number. But the Great Pyramid is too large for a single key. Its precision is the sum of many smaller precisions, most of them repeated by people whose individual lives are barely visible. A quarry face cut slightly straighter, a cord pulled taut, a sledge path wetted, a ration delivered. A foreman correcting a course before the mistake hardens into stone. The ancient achievement becomes more human and therefore more impressive when seen this way. Not impossible, not effortless, not supernatural. A disciplined civilization takes the older sacred geometry of stone and sky, then magnifies it until it becomes a mountain that can still make the modern world feel young. Behind every polished face of stone is a world that looks far less like a miracle and far more like a work site at dawn. The air is cool only for a short while. Men move before the heat rises. Dust clings to skin. Bread is carried in baskets. Ropes are checked by touch. And tools that seem humble from a distance become, in trained hands, extensions of judgment. The pyramid, the temple platform, the levelled foundation, the fitted block. None of these begins with grandeur. They begin with routines. Someone counts, someone sharpens, someone hauls water, someone watches the line, someone curses a stone that refuses to shift. Ancient precision is not born only in the mind of a royal architect. It is born in repetition, in thousands of ordinary actions disciplined until they produce something that feels beyond the ordinary. The builder's world is one of the great corrections to the old image of ancient monuments. For a long time, popular imagination filled the gaps with misery alone, endless anonymous slaves dragged across the desert under whips, forced to build tombs for kings who saw them as nothing. Coercion and hierarchy certainly existed in ancient states, and labour could be harsh, dangerous, and unequal. But the evidence from places like Giza complicates the simple picture. Workers' settlements, bakeries, animal bones, administrative marks, medical traces, and organised cemeteries suggest a managed labour force, including skilled crews, seasonal workers, and support staff. What survives in the record suggests not a mob driven blindly, but a structured society turning its agricultural surplus and administrative power toward a sacred national project. Food is one of the least romantic and most important technologies behind ancient megastructures. A stone cannot move if the people moving it are hungry. At Giza, the labour force needed bread, beer, onions, fish, cattle, water, fuel, and shelter. This required farmers in the Nile Valley, herders, bakers, brewers, scribes, storehouse managers, and transport crews. The pyramid rises not only because stone is quarried, but because grain is harvested, cattle are slaughtered, ovens are fired, and rations are distributed on time. Precision in stone depends on precision in supply. A failed delivery can slow a crew as surely as a broken rope. The Nile itself becomes part of the machinery. Egypt's flood cycle shaped the rhythm of labour and transport. When inundation covered fields, agricultural work changed, and the state could draw on labour in different ways. Stone could move by boat along the river and through canals or harbour basins closer to the plateau. The details of every route remain debated, especially for specific phases of pyramid construction, but the broader principle is clear. Ancient builders used the landscape intelligently. They did not fight nature at every step. They waited for water, followed slopes, prepared roads, and moved weight when conditions favoured movement. Modern eyes often imagine ancient engineering as a contest between human weakness and stone. Ancient engineers seem to have understood it more as negotiation. The tools were simple, but simple does not mean crude. Copper chisels, stone pounders, wooden sledges, ropes of plant fibre, levers, rollers in some contexts, plumb bobs, squares, sighting rods, and measuring cords can accomplish astonishing work when used by skilled hands. Copper is softer than iron, but it can cut limestone, especially when maintained and combined with abrasives. Harder stones can be shaped through pounding, grinding, and patience. A dolorite hammerstone does not look impressive in a museum case until one imagines it striking granite hour after hour, day after day, in a quarry where every blow removes only a little of the mountain. The ancient toolkit is not magical. Its power lies in time, skill, and organisation. Rope deserves its own quiet place in the story. Without strong rope, many ancient projects become almost impossible. Rope binds sledges, controls loads, steadies stones, measures distance, marks straight lines, lifts, drags, and holds tension between human bodies and dead weight. A rope team is a social instrument as much as a technical one. People must pull together, respond to signals, keep rhythm, adjust force, and trust that the fibres will hold. In some ancient images, teams haul colossal statues on sledges while a worker pours liquid before the runners, likely reducing friction on the path. The scene is practical and revealing. It shows that the secret is not a hidden machine, but a chain of small efficiencies. Wet the track, smooth the road, coordinate the pull, repeat. Administration is another invisible tool. The ancient Egyptian state, like other early states, became powerful partly because it could count and command. Marks on stones, inscriptions naming crews, ceilings, tallies, and records point towards systems of accountability. A block may carry a crew name or placement mark, not because the builders expected tourists thousands of years later to admire it, but because large projects require communication. Which stone goes where? Which crew is responsible? How many workers receive rations? How much material remains? The more precise the monument, the more intolerant it becomes of confusion. Bureaucracy, dry as it may sound, is one of the hidden engines of wonder. There is also craft specialization. Not everyone on a building site does the same work. Some quarry, some rough shape, some haul, some dress surfaces, some survey, some repair tools, some prepare ramps or tracks, some manage animals, kitchens, workshops, and storage. A master builder may understand the whole plan, but the plan survives only through smaller expertises. One person knows how a stone sounds when a crack runs through it. Another knows how to twist fibre into rope strong enough for hauling. Another knows how to sight a line against the horizon. Another knows when a block is close enough to its final face and when one more correction is needed. Scholars still debate how formal these roles were in every case, but the surviving evidence suggests a labour world far more organised than the old image of brute force allows. The surprising thing is how ordinary much of it feels. Not easy, never easy, but ordinary in its components: bread, rope, mud brick barracks, wooden sledges, copper edges, water, counting, skill, muscle, time. The monument becomes less mysterious in one sense and more profound in another. If an impossible-looking structure can arise from ordinary materials, then the real force behind it is not lost technology, but human coordination on a scale modern people rarely experience directly. A city, a valley, perhaps an entire kingdom, turns toward a single project long enough for stone to become ideology. This does not mean every question is solved. The exact sequence of construction, the details of ramps, the organization of rotating labor, the methods used in the most difficult placements, and the lived experience of the workers all remain partly hidden. No single explanation fully accounts for the whole process from quarry face to finished monument. But the builder's world gives the mystery a human shape. It replaces the fantasy of impossible machines with something harder to dismiss. Disciplined hands, trained eyes, fed bodies, measured ground, and a society willing to make precision the work of many lives. Once the ordinary machinery of bread, rope, water, and counting is visible, the ancient world becomes less like a place of miracles and more like a place of relentless ambition. Yet there are stones that still make the explanation catch in the throat. They are not merely large, they are excessive, almost unreasonable, as if some builders decided that the measure of power was not height alone, but weight itself. A pyramid distributes millions of blocks into a mountain. A colossal monolith asks a different question. How does a society cut one enormous piece from the living rock, keep it from breaking, move it, lift it, and place it with enough control that it becomes part of an ordered structure rather than a disaster? At Aswan, in southern Egypt, an unfinished obelisk lies still attached to the bedrock, abandoned in the quarry like a thought interrupted. It would have been taller than any known Egyptian obelisk if completed, and its failure is one of the most useful accidents in the history of ancient engineering. Because it was never freed, it reveals the process. Workers carved trenches around the stone, shaping its sides while it remained joined to the granite beneath. Dolerite pounders, harder than the granite they struck, were used to bruise and remove the stone little by little. The surface still carries marks of labour, not smooth magic, but repeated impact. Then a crack appeared. The great stone was left where it lay, too flawed to finish, too heavy to forgive. That crack is important. It reminds us that ancient builders did not possess effortless mastery over matter. They failed. They misjudged stone. They invested huge labour and sometimes had to abandon it. What survives in the record suggests skill of an extraordinary order, but also risk, waste, and limits. The unfinished obelisk is not evidence of a secret technology lost in perfection. It is evidence of skilled people working close to the boundary of what their material could bear. They knew how to shape granite, but granite could still betray them. Obelisks were more than stone needles. In Egypt, they were solar forms, associated with the sun god and royal power, rising from temple courts as frozen rays of light. To make one required not only quarrying, but transport along the Nile and erection at the destination. A completed obelisk had to be separated from bedrock, moved to the river, loaded onto a specially prepared boat or barge, carried downstream, unloaded, and raised upright without snapping. Scholars still debate the precise methods used at each stage, especially for the largest examples. Sand ramps, ropes, levers, timber frameworks, and controlled lowering or raising systems are all part of plausible reconstructions, but no surviving manual walks us through the whole process. The difficulty is not imagining a possible method. The difficulty is recovering the exact choreography. Far to the north, in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, the stones of Baalbek push this problem into even stranger territory. The Roman sanctuary there, especially the temple complex later associated with Jupiter, stands on a platform that includes some of the largest worked stones ever used in construction. The famous trilithon consists of 3 colossal blocks set into the podium wall, each weighing hundreds of tons. Nearby, in the quarry, even larger stones remain unfinished or unused, including the enormous block sometimes called the Stone of the Pregnant Woman. They lie close enough to the finished sanctuary to suggest the ancient project's scale, but far enough from complete placement to preserve the mystery of intention and process. Baalbek has attracted more speculation than almost any ancient stone site, and it is easy to understand why. The blocks are immense, their placement is precise. Popular stories sometimes leap toward lost super-civilizations or non-human builders, but such claims are unsupported and unnecessary. The Roman world, and the earlier traditions it built upon, possessed advanced engineering, disciplined labour, lifting devices, roads, surveying, and a willingness to spend extravagantly on sacred architecture. Yet acknowledging this does not make Baalbek simple. No single explanation fully accounts for every decision behind the largest stones. Why use blocks so huge when smaller blocks could have achieved structural stability more easily? Was the choice practical, symbolic, traditional, or a display of imperial force? Scholars still debate the balance. In some ways, the bigger stones are less efficient than smaller ones. They are dangerous to quarry, dangerous to move, and dangerous to place. If one cracks, months or years of work can be lost. This means their use may have carried meaning beyond convenience. A colossal block is a political statement in geological form. It says that the ruler, the city, the god, or the empire can command not just people, but the Earth's own mass. At Baalbek, the platform makes the temple rise from a base that feels older than human time, as if divine authority has been anchored into bedrock. The engineering is real, but so is the theatre. At every quarry, the first act is selection. Builders must read the rock before cutting it. They look for flaws, bedding planes, grain, accessibility, and the possibility of freeing a block without destroying it. This knowledge is intimate, earned through sound, touch, and inherited experience. A quarry is not merely a source of material. It is a workshop open to the sky, where the future monument begins as a negative space around stone. Trenches are cut, surfaces are dressed, roads or tracks are prepared. Human force is gathered around a geological body that has slept for millions of years and is now being asked to move. When such stones finally reach their destination, their meaning changes. They are no longer parts of a mountain, they become parts of a human order. An obelisk stands in the temple court and turns sunlight into authority. A platform block disappears into a wall but carries the weight of spectacle. A colossal foundation makes a temple seem older than the people who worship inside it. The precision is not only in the cutting or moving, it is in the transformation of raw mass into public certainty. And still the abandoned stones may be the most haunting of all. The cracked obelisk at Aswan, the unused giants at Baalbek, the half-freed blocks in quarries. These are monuments to interruption. They show ancient ambition before completion polished away the struggle, and in them precision remains a wager against fracture, distance, gravity, and time. A stone lifted into place can display power, but a stone aligned with the sky does something more unsettling. It seems to listen. It waits in darkness for a certain morning, catches the sun along a narrow axis, frames a star at a particular season, or turns a shadow into a sign that the year has changed. After the quarries, the ramps, the ropes, and the colossal blocks, the story of ancient precision rises into a quieter realm, where the heaviest monuments are made to answer movements too slow and distant for the hand to touch. The sky gives no written instructions. It offers cycles, and ancient builders learn to read them with a patience that modern life has made difficult to imagine. Across the ancient world, temples and monuments are often placed with deliberate attention to celestial events. This does not mean every doorway points to a star or every ruin hides a secret code. Some alignments are obvious and repeated, others may be coincidence, later interpretation, or the result of practical concerns such as terrain, older buildings, winds, processional routes, or local topography. Scholars still debate many examples, and the evidence remains incomplete because the rituals, calendars, and sighting practices that gave these alignments meaning have often disappeared. Yet the strongest cases show that ancient builders did not treat the heavens as distant decoration. They treated them as a moving architecture above the earth, and sometimes they built below in response. In Egypt, the bond between stone and sky is almost impossible to separate from kingship. Temples are not simply houses for gods. They are controlled landscapes of light, darkness, axis, enclosure, and procession. At Abu Simbel, the great temple of Ramesses II is arranged so that sunlight penetrates deep into the sanctuary on certain days of the year, illuminating seated figures within while leaving one associated with the underworld in shadow. The exact calendrical meaning has been debated, especially because later relocation of the temple to save it from the rising waters of Lake Nasser changed its setting. But the underlying principle remains powerful. The monument is designed so that the sun itself enters the mountain and confirms royal and divine order. This kind of event is not merely visual, it is political timekeeping. When the sun reaches the inner chamber, the ruler's world appears synchronized with the cosmos. A human king, a god, a carved interior, and a predictable celestial cycle all meet in one carefully staged moment. To a society that sees cosmic order as fragile and sacred, precision becomes a form of reassurance. The sun returns, the temple receives it, the rituals continue, the kingdom, at least in stone, remains aligned with the universe. The Maya world offers another expression of this same impulse, though in a very different landscape, at sites such as Chichen Itza, Xmal, Palenque, and many others. Buildings relate in complex ways to solar cycles, Venus, horizon positions, and calendrical systems. The famous pyramid known as El Castillo at Chichen Itza draws modern crowds because of the serpent-like shadow effect associated with the equinox seasons. When light and shadow appear along the stairway in a way that evokes the feathered serpent, the popular presentation is sometimes simplified, and specialists continue to examine how intentional, exact, and historically used the effect was. But there is no serious doubt that Maya elites and ritual specialists possess sophisticated astronomical knowledge. Their calendars, inscriptions, and architectural orientations show a world intensely attentive to cycles of days, planets, ceremonies, dynastic memory, and sacred renewal. The precision here is different from the fitted joints of Andean masonry or the levelled base of a pyramid. It is a precision of recurrence. A building may be designed so that its orientation reflects the sunrise on dates significant to agriculture or ritual. A sightline may connect a palace, temple, or horizon feature. A ruler may place his authority within a calendar so intricate that power seems not merely inherited, but timed. What survives in the record suggests that astronomy was not a separate science in the modern sense. It was woven into kingship, farming, warfare, divination, and the telling of history. In the highlands and deserts of the ancient Americas, observatories and alignments also appear in forms that resist easy labels. At Chanquillo in Peru, a line of 13 towers along a ridge creates one of the clearest known ancient solar observation systems in the Americas. From viewing points, the position of sunrise or sunset moves along the row of towers through the year, allowing observers to track the solar calendar with remarkable clarity. Unlike more ambiguous cases, Chanquillo's layout gives strong evidence for deliberate solar observation. Its builders turned a ridge into an instrument, using architecture not to enclose space, but to divide the horizon into time. That idea, a horizon divided into time, may be one of the oldest forms of scientific architecture. No lenses are required, no metal gears, no written equations. A fixed point on the ground, a repeated observation, and a stable horizon can become a calendar. The same principle can guide farmers, priests, navigators, and rulers. It can tell a community when rains may be expected, when ceremonies should begin, when stored food must be protected, when the dead or the gods should be honoured. The monument does not move, but because the sky moves, the monument becomes active. In Cambodia, the great temple complex of Angkor Wat also reflects an ordered relationship between architecture, cosmology, and celestial orientation. Its westward orientation has been interpreted in relation to Vishnu, funerary symbolism, and solar events. Though scholars continue to debate the full meaning, its galleries, towers, moats, and proportions create a vast symbolic landscape, often understood as an earthly reflection of cosmic mountains and sacred geography. Here again, precision is not merely technical neatness. It is the arrangement of water, stone, direction, myth, and royal devotion into one immense statement. A temple becomes a model of the universe, not because every measurement encodes a hidden message, but because the whole structure expresses a world where sacred order can be built. The danger in studying ancient alignments is overreading. Given enough monuments, doorways, walls, and horizon points, some will align with something by chance. Later observers may impose patterns that ancient builders never intended. Popular theories often turn every angle into a secret astronomical code, or imagine vanished sciences far beyond the evidence. Such claims are disputed and often unsupported. The more interesting truth is stricter and stronger. Ancient people did not need impossible knowledge to create astonishing alignments. They needed time, clear observation, cultural memory, and reasons to care. A temple aligned with time is therefore both humble and grand. It begins with someone watching dawn from the same place more than once. It ends, sometimes, with a monument that holds that observation for centuries. The sun enters, the shadow falls, the star rises, the calendar turns, and the stone seems to know. But the knowing belongs to the people who placed it there, to generations who study the sky until its cycles became part of their architecture. The precision is not supernatural. It is attention made durable, and in that durability, the ancient world reveals one of its deepest forms of intelligence. Far from the desert alignments of Egypt and the sun-watching temples of other ancient worlds, the Andes present a different kind of precision, one shaped by mountains, earthquakes, thin air, and stone that seems to have learned how to breathe. Above the city of Cusco, where slopes rise into cold light and clouds drag their shadows across the high ground, the walls of Sacsayhuaman still hold their impossible calm. The stones do not form neat courses of equal rectangles. They swell, curve, angle, and interlock in massive polygonal shapes, some with many sides, each fitted to the next so closely that the wall appears less built than negotiated into existence. It is not the clean geometry of a pyramid face. It is a harder, stranger geometry, a geometry of irregular perfection. The first impression is weight. Some blocks at Sacsayhuaman are enormous, far larger than a person standing beside them, and yet their size is not the only reason the place unsettles the eye. Heavy stones exist elsewhere. What makes Andean masonry so haunting is the way mass and intimacy are joined. The wall is gigantic, but the joints are delicate. The stones are rough in outline, but exact in relation. A block may have bulges, recessed angles, and complex edges that seem inconvenient until one sees how they meet the neighbouring stones. Every irregularity has been answered. Every face has a partner. The result is a wall that carries the visual force of natural rock and the unmistakable discipline of human design. This is one of the places where the modern word precision must expand. In the Andes, precision is not always about straightness. It is about fit, resilience, and adaptation. The Inca and their predecessors built in a landscape that moves. Earthquakes are not rare interruptions in the Andes. They are part of the geological life of the mountains. Mortared walls can crack when the ground shakes, because rigidity becomes weakness. Dry stone walls, if built with skill, can flex, settle, and remain standing. The great polygonal blocks of Inca masonry have often endured seismic forces that damaged later colonial buildings placed above or beside them. The stones are not frozen in a brittle order. They hold together through contact, gravity, mass, and subtle movement. How they were made remains one of the most debated questions in ancient engineering. The evidence points toward human skill, not lost machines or impossible technology. Hammerstones of harder rock, abrasion, careful shaping, repeated testing, earthen ramps, levers, ropes, sledges, and organized labor all belong to plausible explanations. Inca builders did not use iron tools, wheels for transport, or draft animals capable of pulling such loads in the way oxen or horses did in other parts of the world. The llama was useful, but not for dragging giant masonry blocks. So the work depended on human teams, prepared paths, and immense coordination. Scholars still debate the exact sequence of shaping and fitting, whether stones were dressed mostly at the quarry, refined at the wall, lifted and tested repeatedly, or matched through templates, measuring devices, and expert visual judgment. No single explanation fully accounts for every joint. A lesser-known aspect of this masonry is that not all Inca stonework is the same. The empire used different styles for different purposes, statuses, and locations. Some walls are made of fieldstones and mortar, some use rectangular ashlar blocks laid in even courses. Others, especially in sacred or elite contexts, display the famous polygonal fitting. This variation matters because it shows choice. The builders were not using one method because they knew no other. They selected techniques according to meaning, function, labor availability, and the importance of the place. A finely fitted wall at a royal or sacred site was not merely strong, it was a statement that the location belonged to a higher order of power. At Machu Picchu, the same intelligence appears on a different scale. The site is often remembered for its dramatic setting, perched between steep slopes and cloud forest. But its greatest achievement may be less visible drainage. Heavy rainfall in such terrain can destroy a poorly planned settlement. Terraces, foundations, channels, and carefully prepared substructures helped control water and stabilize the mountain. The polished stones of temples and elite buildings catch the eye, but beneath them lies a hidden engineering system that keeps the city from sliding into ruin. What survives in the record suggests that Andean precision was as much about understanding water, slope, and foundation as about making beautiful joints. This sacred geography of the Andes also shaped stonework. Mountains were not inert backdrops. They were powerful beings, ancestors, guardians, sources of water and fertility. The Inca world understood landscape through relationships between people, rulers, shrines, roads, springs, peaks, and celestial events. A stone could matter because of its placement in this living geography. Natural rock outcrops were often incorporated into architecture rather than erased. At Machu Picchu and other sites, carved rock, built walls, and mountain forms sometimes appear to echo one another, as if architecture is not conquering the landscape but joining it. The evidence remains incomplete, and modern interpretations can easily go too far. But the pattern is clear enough. Andean builders often treated stone as something with presence, not just material. This may help explain why the walls feel so different from the monuments of river valley empires. Egyptian pyramid builders imposed a pure geometric form on the horizon. Roman engineers often sought repeatable systems of arches, roads, and concrete. Inca builders, especially in their finest masonry, seem to have pursued a precision that honors irregularity. Each stone remains itself, with its own shape, but is made to belong perfectly to a collective body. It is difficult not to see a political metaphor there, though one must be careful. The Inca Empire itself joined diverse peoples, landscapes, and local traditions into a vast highland order centered on Cusco. A wall of unequal stones locked into unity would have been an image any ruler could appreciate. Yet the human effort behind that unity was immense. Quarrying, transport, and fitting required labour drawn from communities through systems of obligation. Workers may have served the state through rotational labour, building roads, terraces, storehouses, temples, and royal estates. The beauty of the stones should not hide the pressure behind them. Precision is often admired after the command has vanished, but in its own time it may have been felt as duty, devotion, tax, service, and fear. The wall is both art and authority. At Sacsayhuaman, the stones still refuse to become simple. They are explainable in principle and mysterious in practice. One can reject unsupported claims of aliens or vanished super tools and still stand before the wall with honest astonishment. The real mystery is not whether human beings could do this. They did. The mystery is how much knowledge can live in hands, eyes, rhythm, and communal labour without leaving behind a written manual. The Andean walls preserve the result. Not the full choreography. They show a civilization that made stone adapt to mountains and earthquakes, and in doing so created a form of precision that feels almost alive. The Andean walls leave behind one of the most difficult forms of evidence, a finished answer without the working notes. The stones are there, undeniable and silent, but the design process that brought them together has mostly vanished. No stack of blueprints survives beside Sacsayhuaman. No complete builder's manual explains how a quarry master judged the next cut, how a crew recorded a stone's future place, how an apprentice learned the difference between a surface that looked close and a surface that truly belonged. This absence is not unique to the Andes. Across much of the ancient world, the most precise structures were made by societies whose plans, if they existed in perishable form, have been lost. Wood rots, plaster breaks, cord decays. Memory dies with the people who carried it. Stone remains, but the instructions disappear. Modern people are trained to imagine precision as something that begins on paper or on a screen. A building is drawn before it is built. Measurements are standardized. Calculations are stored. Engineers can return to a plan, revise it, copy it, share it, archive it. Ancient builders often worked in a different world, one where knowledge could live in bodies as much as documents. A master mason did not necessarily need a full drawing of every stone to understand a wall. A surveyor did not need a printed diagram to establish an axis. A temple architect might use chords, grids, proportional rules, reference points, and models rather than a blueprint in the modern sense. What survives in the record suggests that ancient precision often depended on systems of practice, not on written plans alone. This does not mean ancient builders worked casually. Quite the opposite. A society can transmit exact knowledge through apprenticeship with great discipline. A child or young worker watches older hands choose stone, measure distance, stretch cord, prepare mortar, read the slope of ground, polish a face, or correct an angle. At first, the learner carries, sweeps, fetches water, and repeats the simplest tasks. Over years, the eye sharpens. The hand learns pressure. The body learns what level feels like, what tension in a rope means, how a block should sound under a hammer, how a line can drift if not checked again and again. This is knowledge that resists easy writing because it is partly sensory. A manual can name a tool. It cannot fully transfer the feel of the tool striking good stone. In Egypt, some planning marks, grids, sketches, and measuring systems do survive, though not enough to reconstruct every project completely. Artists used grids to guide proportions. Surveyors used ropes and sighting methods. Builders left marks on stones that could identify crews, orientation or placement, ostraca, Papyri, inscriptions, and later architectural traces show a world where writing and measurement mattered. Yet even in Egypt, with its rich scribal culture, the practical knowledge behind the greatest monuments was not preserved as a complete engineering textbook. The pyramid builders' most valuable instructions may have lived in trained teams, in repeated procedures, and in a chain of command that did not need to explain itself to the distant future. In Mesopotamia, mud brick architecture created another problem for memory. Ziggurats and city walls could be enormous, but mud brick requires constant maintenance. Plans could be embedded in tradition rebuild on the same sacred platform. Keep the temple aligned with an older axis. Preserve the relationship between courtyard, sanctuary, stair, and city. Written records tell us much about labour, offerings, kings, and divine dedication. But the exact hands-on methods of ancient brickmasters often remain only partly visible. The evidence remains incomplete, especially because so much of what they built returned to Earth. Still, the repeated rebuilding of sacred places shows a powerful architectural memory. The plan was not always a document. Sometimes the plan was the place itself. Templates may have played a larger role than surviving evidence can prove. A complex stone could be matched by tracing, measuring, or transferring angles from one surface to another. Wooden frames, cords with knots, plumb lines, straight edges, measuring rods, clay models, or full-scale guide marks on prepared ground could all help builders carry a design from intention into material. In some traditions, proportions mattered more than fixed units. A room, facade, or sacred enclosure could be generated through ratios, repeated modules, or the dimensions of earlier revered structures. This allowed builders to reproduce order without needing every detail drawn in advance. No single explanation fully accounts for all cases, but the principle is clear: precision can emerge from rules that are simple in form and sophisticated in use. There is a lesser-known kind of ancient intelligence in correction. Modern people often imagine precision as perfect planning before action begins. Ancient builders may have relied more on planned adjustment. A foundation is checked as it is prepared. A block is moved into rough position, tested, removed, shaped again, and tested once more. A wall is corrected course by course. A sightline is confirmed at dawn, not merely assumed. This does not reduce the achievement. It reveals patience as a technology. Repeated correction can produce results that look impossibly exact when only the final surface is seen. The loss of written blueprints also explains why some popular mysteries grow so quickly. When modern observers cannot find the plan, they imagine there must have been a secret. But absence is not proof of impossibility. Many ancient cultures stored technical knowledge in master builders, guild-like craft traditions, religious institutions, palace workshops, and inherited obligations. Some of these traditions were deliberately guarded, others simply seemed too ordinary to record. A builder does not always write down what everyone in the workshop already knows. Only when the workshop disappears does the ordinary become mysterious. This is why ancient precision should be understood as a culture, not just a technique. The builder's skill was supported by shared standards, what counted as straight, sacred, level, complete, acceptable, beautiful, or worthy of a king or god. A wall was judged by people who knew walls. A temple axis was checked by people who cared about ritual correctness. A road grade, a canal slope, a terrace drain, a stone joint, all existed inside communities of expertise. When those communities vanished, later ages inherited the products but not the habits of judgment that made them possible. So the mystery deepens without needing to become supernatural. Ancient people could build with impossible-looking precision because their knowledge was distributed across tools, bodies, landscapes, memories, rituals, and institutions. Some of it was written, much of it was practiced, some of it was corrected in the act of making, And much of it died quietly when empires fell. Languages changed, workshops closed, and sacred duties were forgotten. The stones remain like sentences from a book whose grammar has partly disappeared. They can still be read, but not completely. And that incompleteness is what makes them endure in the mind. The stones that seize the eye are usually the tallest, the smoothest, or the heaviest. But many of the ancient world's most precise megastructures were not built to be admired from a distance. They ran beneath streets, crossed valleys, followed slopes so gentle they almost vanish, carried water through cities, drained rain from mountain terraces, and held roads steady across deserts, forests, marshes, and high passes. They were not always monuments in the ceremonial sense. They were systems. And without them, the more famous monuments could not have lived for long. A city can raise a temple only if it can also manage water, movement, food, waste, and distance. Precision, in this hidden world, is not a polished joint between two stones. It is a canal sloped correctly for kilometre after kilometre. It is a road that survives rain and traffic. It is a drain that keeps a royal estate from collapsing into mud. The ancient engineer's greatest enemy is often not weight, but flow. Water is useful only when persuaded. Too little slope, and it stagnates. Too much, and it tears its own channel apart. In Mesopotamia, where some of the earlier cities rose between the Tigris and Euphrates, irrigation was not a luxury. It was the difference between abundance and ruin. Canals carried water into fields, fed urban life, and helped support temples, palaces, and dense populations. Yet they also brought danger. Silt gathered, channels shifted, salts accumulated in soils. Floods could destroy what careful labour had made. The evidence remains incomplete for many early systems because mud, water, and centuries have erased so much. But what survives suggests that ancient societies learned quickly that managing a river meant managing time itself. A canal had to be dug, cleared, repaired, measured, and governed. Engineering and administration became inseparable. In Egypt, the Nile offered a different kind of order. Its annual flood could renew the fields, but it also demanded careful observation and control. Basins, dikes, canals, harbours, and river transport shaped the civilization as surely as pyramids did. The stones of Giza could move because the river made heavy transport possible, and because people understood when water would help rather than hinder them. This is a recurring pattern in ancient megastructures. The visible monument depends on an invisible landscape of routes and supply. A pyramid is not only a pyramid, it is also a quarry road, a harbour, a delivery schedule, a rationing system, and a river timed to human ambition. The Romans later turned water management into one of the most recognisable signatures of empire. Their aqueducts did not simply carry water, they announced that Roman order could cross uneven land without losing its line. Some aqueducts ran mostly underground, hidden in channels and tunnels, emerging only where valleys forced them into arches. The famous arcades were dramatic, but the true precision lay in gradient. Water had to descend gradually over long distances, sometimes following curves and contours that look inefficient until one remembers that gravity was the engine. Roman surveyors used instruments such as the chorobates and groma to establish levels and lines. Their methods were practical, not mysterious, but their results could be immense. A city supplied by aqueducts could feed baths, fountains, latrines, houses, workshops, and public life on a scale that made water itself part of political identity. Yet Rome did not invent the need or the intelligence behind such systems. Earlier societies built qanats, tunnels that tapped groundwater and carried it across dry regions with a slight, controlled slope. These underground water channels, associated especially with ancient Iran and later spread widely, required extraordinary surveying because the builders had to work through the earth from vertical shafts, maintaining direction and gradient without seeing the whole line at once. A qanat is easy to overlook because much of it is hidden. but as an act of precision, it is astonishing. It turns invisible water into a lifeline, and it does so through patient alignment beneath the surface. Scholars still debate the origins and diffusion of some early systems, but no single explanation changes the central fact. Ancient communities mastered subterranean engineering long before modern machinery. Roads reveal another form of disciplined measurement. The Inca road system crossed one of the most difficult landscapes on Earth, binding together deserts, valleys, high plateaus, forests, and mountains. It included paved sections, stairways, suspension bridges, causeways, retaining walls, drainage features, and way stations. It carried runners, armies, officials, goods, and messages through an empire that did not rely on wheeled vehicles for transport. The precision of such a road is not always straightness. In mountains, a straight line may be foolish. The true skill lies in reading the land, holding a route across unstable slopes, bridging ravines, protecting surfaces from water, and linking settlements into a functioning network. Here again, architecture is movement made durable. In the Maya lowlands, causeways known as sakbiob connected sites and ceremonial spaces, sometimes raised above wet ground, sometimes shining with pale plaster under the sun. Their exact purposes varied, and scholars still debate how much they served political, ritual, economic, or symbolic roles in different places. But they show that road building could be more than practical circulation. A raised white road could organize a sacred landscape, connect centers of power, and make movement itself ceremonial. To walk along such a route was to move through designed authority. Drainage may be the least glamorous and most revealing of all. At Machu Picchu, terraces and stone channels manage rainfall with quiet brilliance. The city's survival depends not only on visible walls, but on foundations, gravel layers, retaining systems, and drains that control water before it becomes destruction. Many visitors photograph the temples and terraces without realizing that the mountain is being held together by hidden engineering. This is a lesser-known truth about ancient precision. The most important work is often buried beneath beauty. The wall stands because the water has somewhere to go. The same principle appears in ancient cities from the Indus world to Minoan Crete, where drains, wells, baths, and water systems show a concern for flow and cleanliness that can surprise modern observers. These systems were not always equal across society, and their interpretation varies from site to site, but they remind us that precision was not limited to kings' tombs or temples. It entered streets, courtyards, houses, storage areas, and public spaces. It shaped daily survival. By following water and roads, the mystery of ancient megastructures widens. The greatest builders were not merely people who could lift heavy stones. They were people who could make landscapes function. They could slow a flood, guide a spring, cross a valley, drain a mountain, feed a city, and turn distance into connection. The visible monument may speak the loudest, but the hidden systems kept civilization breathing, and sometimes, when the temples fall silent and the royal names fade, a buried drain or an old road still tells the clearer truth. Precision was not decoration. It was life organized against collapse. Once roads, water, quarries, and hidden systems are understood, the great monuments begin to look less like isolated achievements and more like the visible tips of entire societies arranged around order. A precise wall is never only a wall, a straight causeway is never only a road, a temple aligned with the sun is never only a clever observation of the horizon. In the ancient world, perfection could become power because it made authority look natural. It turned command into geometry. It suggested that the ruler, the priesthood, the city, or the empire did not merely control people, but understood the deep pattern of the world and could make stone obey it. This is one reason ancient megastructures so often stand at the meeting point of engineering and belief. A king who builds high and straight is not only showing wealth, he is showing that disorder has been subdued, Rough land has been levelled, wild stone has been cut, water has been channelled, horizons have been measured, labour has been gathered from villages, fields, workshops, and conquered territories, then directed toward a single form, to the people who approach such a monument. The result can feel inevitable, as if the world itself has accepted the ruler's claim. The geometry becomes persuasion. In Egypt, royal architecture made this relationship especially clear. The pyramid was not simply an enormous tomb. It was a machine of kingship, death, and cosmic transformation. Its form connected the dead king to the sun, the stars, and the eternal order the Egyptians called Ma'at. The precision of its orientation, the careful control of its slopes, the arrangement of temples and causeways, all help present royal death not as an end but as a transition governed by sacred law. The king's body disappeared into stone, but the monument remained in the open desert, visible to generations who would never see his face. Power became durable by becoming measured. This durability mattered because living rulers are fragile. They age, fall ill, face rivals, and die. Stone does not remove that fragility, but it hides it under mass. A monument can make a temporary political order seem timeless. A young dynasty can borrow the authority of the horizon. A ruler whose commands depend on scribes, soldiers, priests, farmers, and administrators can appear instead as the centre of a cosmic arrangement. What survives in the record suggests that many ancient rulers understood this instinctively. They did not build only for shelter or ceremony. They built to make hierarchy visible. In Mesopotamia, the ziggurat rose above the city as a staged mountain of mud brick, repaired, renewed, and dedicated to divine presence. Its precision lay not in polished stone joints, but in elevation, repetition, access, and sacred separation. The temple platform lifted the god's house above ordinary streets, and the city gathered around it economically, ritually, and politically. The ruler who restored or enlarged such a structure could present himself as caretaker of divine order. Inscriptions often emphasize building as piety the king provides for the god, and by doing so proves his legitimacy. Scholars still debate how ordinary citizens experience these structures day to day, but their urban dominance is unmistakable. They made sacred authority part of the skyline. At Angkor, power becomes almost geographical. Reservoirs, canals, roads, temples, and planned spaces shape an immense landscape where royal devotion and hydraulic management are difficult to separate. The great temple mountains evoke cosmic geography, while waterworks help support population, agriculture, and ritual display. Angkor Wat, Angkor Thom, and the wider Khmer landscape show how architecture can transform a region into an image of ordered kingship. No single explanation fully accounts for the rise, maintenance, and eventual stresses of the Angkorian system, but the monuments make one point clear: rulers could use precision not only to build a temple, but to organize the relationship between capital, water, gods, and empire. The same pattern appears in different form in the Roman world. Roman roads, aqueducts, bridges, amphitheatres, baths, and temples made empire physically legible. A road cut across a province told travellers that distance had been disciplined. An aqueduct entering a city declared that water itself had been recruited into public order. A triumphal arch turned military conquest into carved stone memory. Roman precision was often practical, but its public effect was theatrical. Citizens, subjects, merchants, soldiers, and captives all moved through spaces that made Roman authority feel engineered into the earth. A lesser-known but important feature of this power is standardization. Repeated building forms teach people what authority should look like. A Roman camp, a road milestone, an Egyptian temple pylon, an Inca way station, a Maya ceremonial plaza, each can create recognition across distance. When people encounter the same architectural language again and again, power feels continuous. It does not have to explain itself every time. The stones speak in a grammar of rule. Precision could also control access. Ancient monuments often guide bodies carefully, gates narrow movement, stairways raise the visitor toward privileged space, courtyards expose or conceal, inner sanctuaries remain dark, restricted, and charged with meaning. A temple axis may pull the eye forward while keeping the most sacred object hidden until the proper moment. This is not accidental. Architecture trains behavior. It teaches who may enter, who must wait, who may see, who must bow, who belongs at the center, and who remains outside. In this sense, a perfectly planned building is also a map of social order. Yet perfection was never neutral. It could inspire awe, but also extract labor. The same monument that later visitors admire as beauty may have been experienced by builders as obligation. Farmers could be drawn away from fields. Communities could owe labor to the state. Conquered peoples might move stone for rulers they did not choose. Skilled workers could take pride in their craft while still serving systems of inequality. The evidence remains incomplete, and the balance of devotion, coercion, payment, duty, and prestige varied from culture to culture. But ancient precision always had a human cost. Power looked smooth because many hands absorbed the strain. This is what makes these structures so complicated. They are achievements of intelligence and instruments of command. They preserve craft, belief, mathematics, and imagination, but also hierarchy. A fitted stone can be beautiful and political at the same time. A temple aligned with sunrise can express reverence and royal propaganda together. A road can connect people while also carrying armies. Ancient megastructures endure because they were built to make certain orders seem permanent. And even when those orders eventually failed, the stones continue to perform their old work in a quieter way. They still make viewers look upward. They still make authority feel close, even after the rulers have turned to dust. The power made visible in stone often promises permanence, but permanence is exactly what ancient history refuses to grant. The wall stands, the road survives, the temple keeps its axis, the pyramid holds its shape against the desert, and yet the people who built them pass into crisis, transformation, or silence. This is one of the strangest qualities of ancient megastructures. They were created to express order, but many now survive as evidence that order failed. Their precision outlived the systems that demanded it. The stones remained after the rations stopped, after the rituals changed, after the royal names lost their force, after the roads no longer carried messengers and the canals filled with silt. Collapse rarely arrives as one clean event. A city does not always fall in a single night, and an empire does not always understand that it is ending while the end is happening. More often, the signs accumulate, fields yield less, trade becomes uncertain. A ruler struggles to command labor. A priesthood loses authority. Drought strains reservoirs. Floods damage canals. Borders become harder to defend. Workers leave. Rebels rise. Rivals invade. Or the old ceremonies no longer hold the same meaning. The evidence remains incomplete in many cases, and scholars still debate the balance between climate, warfare, economics, disease, political instability, and social change. But the ruins show that even the most disciplined architecture could not guarantee the survival of the world around it. In Egypt, the pyramids did not collapse physically, but the age that made the largest of them possible did not last unchanged. Royal pyramid building continued after Giza, yet later pyramids were often smaller, less massive, or built with different materials and priorities. The Old Kingdom eventually entered a period of political fragmentation, regional power, and strain. The Great Pyramid still stood, but the centralized force that had once gathered labor, food, stone, and sacred authority into such a project weakened. This is not a simple story of one monument causing decline, nor of one crisis breaking a kingdom. No single explanation fully accounts for the transformation. But the contrast is haunting. A structure built to declare eternal kingship became a survivor of the very instability kingship could not escape. In Mesopotamia, mud brick monuments required constant renewal. A ziggurat was not like a granite mountain. It lived only as long as people maintained it. Rain, wind, neglect, and conquest could reduce sacred platforms to eroded masses. Their stepped forms softened into hills. Yet some ruins remained so large that later travellers mistook them for natural mounds. The cities around them changed, were rebuilt, abandoned, conquered, renamed, and forgotten. Temples that once organised urban life became archaeological layers. The precision of their original plans had to fight against the nature of their material. Mud brick is honest about time. It returns to earth unless a society keeps choosing to rebuild. At Angkor, the relationship between grandeur and vulnerability becomes almost painful. The Khmer world created vast temples, reservoirs, canals, roads, and urban landscapes of remarkable sophistication. For centuries, water management supported a powerful capital and a sacred geography of kingship, but the same complexity that allowed growth could become difficult to maintain under stress. Scholars still debate the exact causes of Angkor's transformation and decline, including climate variability, political shifts, religious change, regional conflict, and the challenges of maintaining an immense hydraulic system. What survives suggests not a sudden vanishing into jungle, as old romantic stories imagined, but a long and complicated reorganization. Still, the image remains powerful carved towers rising above roots and forest shade, monuments of order surrounded by the slow patience of nature. The Maya lowlands offer another warning against simple collapse stories. Many classic Maya cities experienced decline, abandonment, or political breakdown between the 8th and 10th centuries. But Maya people did not disappear. Communities continued, traditions changed, and Maya descendants remain alive today. The abandoned temples and causeways are not evidence of a vanished people in the absolute sense. They are evidence of cities and political systems that could no longer sustain the same form. Drought, warfare, dynastic competition, environmental strain, and shifting trade networks have all been studied as possible factors. The evidence remains debated, and different cities follow different paths. But the monuments preserve the ambition of rulers whose carved records once claimed power over time itself. Time answered with erosion. In the Andes, Inca precision faced a different kind of rupture. The empire expanded rapidly, joining roads, storehouses, terraces, shrines, and administrative centres into a vast highland system. Its stonework still speaks of control, adaptation, and sacred geography. Then Spanish conquest, disease, civil conflict, and colonial restructuring shattered the political world that had built and maintained that system. Cusco was transformed. Inca walls became foundations for colonial buildings. Sacred spaces were repurposed, suppressed, or reinterpreted. The stones remained in place, but their meaning was forced into a new order. The wall did not fall, the world around it was overwritten. This survival can be more disturbing than destruction. A collapsed monument is easy to mourn. A reused monument asks harder questions. What happens when a sacred stone becomes a foundation for another faith? What happens when a royal road becomes a colonial route? When a temple platform becomes a quarry? When casing stones are stripped from a pyramid to build medieval walls elsewhere? Ancient megastructures often live many lives after their first purpose fades. Their precision makes them valuable to later builders. The same careful cutting that once honoured a god or king can make a block attractive for reuse in a house, fortress, mosque, church, or city wall. Stone remembers, but people are practical. Nature also becomes a second builder. Sand buries, roots pry, rain softens, earthquakes test joints, rivers change course, Deserts preserve some monuments by starving decay, while jungles hide others under green weight. A structure built as a statement of human control eventually enters a longer negotiation with the non-human world. Sometimes the ancient engineers win for astonishing lengths of time. Sometimes they lose slowly. Sometimes the result is a strange collaboration. A ruin half broken by roots, half protected by them. A road visible only from above. A canal line traced through soil. A stone circle lowered into grass but still aligned with the horizon. The collapse around the stones reveals the limit of precision. A wall can resist an earthquake, but not necessarily invasion. A canal can carry water, but not prevent political failure. A pyramid can preserve royal ideology in stone, but not preserve the kingdom forever. Ancient builders could measure land, shape rock, guide rivers, and frame the sky. Yet they could not remove uncertainty from history. The monuments they left behind are therefore not only records of achievement, they are records of vulnerability. They show civilizations at their most organized, and by surviving into ruin, they show that organization is never permanent. This is why abandoned megastructures feel so powerful. They are not silent because nothing happened there. They are silent because too much happened, and most of it is gone. The ceremonies, commands, footsteps, songs, fears, calculations, and offerings have faded, while the stone remains in the open air. Each ruin is both victory and warning, proof that human beings can build with astonishing precision, and proof that even astonishing precision cannot hold a civilization in place forever. Where ruins stand beyond the memory of their builders, myths gather almost automatically. A stone too large to explain becomes a doorway for speculation. A joint too fine for casual understanding becomes evidence, in some minds, of a vanished master race, a lost global civilization, or visitors from the stars. The modern world often approaches ancient precision with a strange mixture of admiration and disbelief. It praises the monuments, but sometimes doubts the people who made them. This doubt is not harmless. It can turn real human achievement into fantasy, and in doing so, it erases the labour, intelligence, and cultural worlds of ancient societies more completely than time already has. The impulse is understandable at first. A visitor stands before Baalbek's colossal stones, the walls of Sacsayhuaman, the Great Pyramid, or the buried remains of an ancient city, and feels the mind resist the evidence. The scale does not match ordinary experience. Most people today have never seen 100 workers move a block with ropes. They have never watched stone dressed by hand for months. They have never lived in a society where sacred duty, royal command, seasonal labour, and inherited craft could all focus on one project for decades. Modern life is filled with powerful machines, but it is also filled with impatience. When we cannot imagine doing something slowly, we may mistake slowness for impossibility. This is how unsupported theories find their opening. They offer a shortcut through difficulty. Instead of reconstructing quarry marks, labour organisation, toolware, soil ramps, transport routes, astronomical observations, and political economy, they provide one dramatic answer. The stones were cut by unknown technology. The plans came from a lost civilization. The builders were guided by beings beyond Earth. The attraction is obvious. A simple secret is easier to hold than a complicated history, but the evidence for such claims is weak or absent, and serious archaeology does not need them. The real record is already extraordinary enough. One of the most common mistakes is to confuse unknown details with total mystery. Scholars may debate how a particular stone was moved, exactly what ramp shape was used, or how a specific alignment was established. That does not mean the entire monument is unexplained. In archaeology, uncertainty often exists at the level of process, sequence, or interpretation, not at the level of human capability. The evidence remains incomplete. But incompleteness is not a blank space where any theory can be placed. It is a boundary that must be approached carefully. A missing manual does not prove a missing civilization. A difficult task does not prove impossible tools. Another mistake is to treat ancient people as if they were less observant because they lacked modern instruments. A society without steel cranes may still understand leverage. A society without telescopes may still track the sun, moon, stars, and planets with great care. A society without written blueprints may still preserve technical knowledge through apprenticeship and tradition. The assumption that modern machinery is the only path to precision is itself a modern bias. Ancient builders had fewer kinds of power, but they often used the powers they had with extraordinary patience. They measured by chord, sight, shadow, water, proportion, and repeated correction. They learned from failure. They built within communities that valued the result enough to sustain the work. The erasure becomes especially clear when popular myths surround monuments built by non-European societies. The pyramids of Egypt, the stonework of the Andes, the temples of Mesoamerica, the platforms of the Pacific, and the ruins of African, Asian, and indigenous American civilizations are often targeted by claims that their builders could not have done the work themselves. This pattern has a long and uncomfortable history. It grows from colonial assumptions that treated some ancient peoples as too primitive for their own achievements. Even when modern versions are presented as harmless wonder, they can still repeat the old insult in softer language. To say that the monument is magnificent should not require doubting the humanity of its makers. There are, of course, real lost technologies in a modest sense. Techniques can vanish when workshops disappear. Recipes for mortars, pigments, plasters, alloys, waterproofing, quarrying methods, and surveying habits can be forgotten. A craft tradition may die without leaving full instructions. But this is not the same as a lost superscience. It is the ordinary fragility of practical knowledge. A community knows how to do something because people are trained inside it. When the community breaks, the knowledge may scatter. Later people may stand before the result and wonder how it was done, not because the method was magical, but because the chain of teaching has been broken. A useful example appears in Roman concrete. Certain Roman marine concretes have endured in harsh coastal environments with remarkable durability, and modern materials science has studied their mineral properties with real interest. This does not mean Romans had impossible chemistry. It means they developed effective recipes and building practices through empirical knowledge, available materials, and long experience. Some aspects were not replicated in the same way for centuries because the social, economic, and technical context changed. Lost knowledge can be real without being mythical. It can be impressive without being supernatural. The same is true of ancient stone fitting, astronomical alignment, road building, and hydraulic engineering. Much of it can be understood in principle. Some of it has been tested experimentally. Researchers have dragged stones on sledges, cut rock with replica tools, surveyed with simple instruments, reconstructed ancient machines, scanned monuments with lasers, and modelled construction sequences. These experiments do not solve every detail, but they shrink the space where fantasy once grew. They also reveal something humbling. Many ancient methods were laborious rather than mysterious. They required endurance more than secret machinery. Still, myths persist because they serve emotional needs. They make the past feel enchanted. They restore wonder to a world that often feels over-explained. They give ruins a secret plot. They allow the viewer to stand before stone and imagine that history is hiding a grand revelation. But the real past does not become smaller when unsupported myths are removed. It becomes more crowded, more human, and more moving. Instead of nameless aliens or faceless super-civilizations, there are quarry workers, rope makers, surveyors, cooks, priests, rulers, apprentices, sailors, farmers, and engineers, all bound into systems of belief and labour. The wonder is not that unknown beings came down to help them. The wonder is that they were enough. Misread ruins also remind us that modern people often value written explanation more than physical evidence. If an ancient culture leaves inscriptions, drawings, or manuals, its achievements are easier to accept. If it leaves only stone, suspicion grows, but stone is evidence, tool marks are evidence, quarry scars are evidence, settlement remains, food waste, roads, ramps, unfinished blocks, broken tools, and human burials are evidence. They may not answer every question, but they place ancient builders firmly back into the story. The task is to listen to what survives without forcing it to say what we want. The true mystery, then, is not whether ancient megastructures were made by human beings. They were. The richer mystery is how many forms human intelligence can take, and how easily later ages forget them. A ruin becomes misread when its builders are reduced to shadows and the finished stone is separated from the lives that shaped it. To restore the builders does not kill the mystery. It gives the mystery weight. It replaces impossible fantasies with the harder and more beautiful fact of human capability stretched across generations. The stones do not need aliens, lost empires, or secret masters to be astonishing. They need only to be seen clearly, with all their labour, uncertainty, ambition, and silence intact. The myths fade most effectively not when wonder is denied, but when the ruins are studied more closely than wonder alone ever allowed. Modern archaeology approaches ancient megastructures with tools the builders could not have imagined. Yet the best of that science does not make the builders smaller. It brings them nearer. A laser scanner passes across a wall and records tiny deviations invisible to the eye. A drone maps a buried road under dry grass. Ground-penetrating radar searches beneath plazas without lifting a stone. Chemical analysis reads the source of pigments, mortar, plaster, or volcanic ash. Microscopes examine tool marks left by hands dead for thousands of years. Satellite images reveal old canals, field systems, city grids, and quarry routes that once disappeared into the surface of the earth. The past does not speak easily, but the instruments are getting better at hearing its faintest sounds. At Giza, modern survey, excavation, and remote sensing have steadily changed the old picture of the pyramid as an isolated miracle. The plateau now appears as a working landscape, tied to harbours, quarries, roads, cemeteries, temples, and settlements. Discoveries connected to workers' communities show bakeries, animal processing, housing areas, and evidence of organised provisioning. Ancient papyri from Wadi al-Jarf, linked to the reign of Khufu, provide a rare administrative glimpse into transport operations involving limestone shipped along waterways. They do not explain every construction detail, and scholars still debate how the stones were raised through the higher stages of the pyramid, but they firmly place the monument inside a world of logistics, record-keeping, skilled labour, and state coordination. The pyramid becomes less like a riddle dropped from the sky, and more like the visible endpoint of an enormous human system. Science also reveals that precision is often more complicated than it first appears. Laser surveys can show where ancient builders achieved astonishing accuracy, but also where they corrected, compromised, or worked around flaws. This matters because perfect monuments can become misleading when seen only from afar. Up close, many ancient structures reveal adjustments. Blocks vary, foundations respond to bedrock, courses shift slightly. Hidden spaces are rougher than public faces. A temple may present symmetry to the viewer while concealing practical irregularities behind its finished surfaces. This does not reduce the achievement, it makes it real. Ancient builders were not gods of geometry. They were experts at controlling imperfection well enough that the final effect became order. Experimental archaeology adds another layer. Researchers have used replica tools to cut stone, dressed blocks by hand, moved heavy objects with ropes and sledges, tested friction on wetted surfaces, reconstructed lifting machines, and explored how simple surveying devices can produce accurate lines. These experiments rarely claim to recreate the exact ancient method in every detail. The evidence remains incomplete, and no single experiment can stand in for an entire civilization. But they show what is physically possible with materials known to ancient builders. They also show the cost in time, labour, and coordination. A stone that appears impossible in the mind becomes difficult but plausible when 20, 50, or 200 people work with prepared ground, good rope, rhythm, and leadership. In the Andes, high-resolution recording has helped researchers study the subtle geometry of fitted masonry. Digital models capture the contours of stones whose shapes are too irregular for easy description. Structural analysis suggests how dry stone walls can dissipate seismic energy, shifting slightly without catastrophic failure. At Machu Picchu, studies of drainage and subsurface construction have revealed that much of the city's survival depends on hidden layers of stone chips, channels, and careful foundation work. The famous view is only the surface. Beneath the terraces and plazas is a quiet architecture of water control. This is one of the recurring surprises of modern research. Ancient beauty often rests on invisible practicality. Remote sensing has transformed entire landscapes. In tropical regions, LIDAR can penetrate forest canopy and reveal urban forms buried under vegetation roads, terraces, reservoirs, platforms, causeways, defensive works, and settlement patterns far larger than earlier ground surveys could easily detect. In the Maya world, LIDAR has shown that many cities were part of dense, engineered landscapes, with causeways, agricultural systems, and water management features extending through areas once imagined as emptier forest. These discoveries do not mean every old theory was wrong, and scholars continue to debate population estimates, political organisation, and environmental impact. But the broader lesson is clear. Megastructures are rarely alone. They belong to networks. The same is true in Cambodia, where aerial mapping and archaeological survey have revealed the scale of Angkor's urban and hydraulic landscape. Reservoirs, canals, embankments, roads, temples, ponds, and occupation mounds form a vast pattern of human modification. Modern research has made it harder to think of Angkor as only a cluster of temples. It was an inhabited, engineered region, shaped by water and power over centuries. At the same time, studies of climate records, sediments, and water systems suggest how vulnerable such complexity could become under extreme stress. Science does not simply explain how greatness was built. It also shows how greatness could become fragile. Materials analysis can be equally revealing on a smaller scale. The study of Roman concrete, Egyptian pigments, Maya lime plaster, ancient mortars, metal clamps, quarry residues, and tool marks shows that ancient builders possessed deep empirical knowledge. They tested materials across generations. They learned which stone resisted weather, which lime mixture hardened well, which aggregate improved durability, which timber could support temporary works, which metal could bite into which surface. This knowledge was not always theoretical in the modern sense, but it was systematic in practice. What survives in the records suggests a world of experiment carried out through craft. Yet modern science has not solved everything, and it should not pretend to. The exact ramp systems used for the Great Pyramid remain debated. The full procedures behind the finest Inca stone fitting are not completely reconstructed. The meanings of many alignments remain uncertain. Some quarry routes are still unknown. Some labour systems can only be inferred from partial evidence. Some monuments have been damaged, reused, restored, looted, flooded, or buried so deeply in later history that the original sequence may never be fully recovered. The best research does not replace mystery with arrogance. It replaces vague mystery with precise uncertainty. That precise uncertainty is valuable. It allows us to say what is known, what is likely, what is possible, and what remains open. It protects the ancient builders from both dismissal and exaggeration. They were not helpless primitives. They were not magicians. They were human beings working inside traditions of observation, craft, command, and belief, sometimes achieving results that still challenge reconstruction. Modern tools can scan their stones down to millimeters, but they cannot fully recover the pressure of a rope in a worker's hands, the judgment in a master builder's eye, or the ceremony that made a line of sunlight matter. Science brings the ruins closer, and in the space that remains, the silence becomes more honest. What remains after the myths are stripped away and the measurements are taken is not disappointment, but something quieter and stronger. The stones become human again. The pyramid is no longer an impossible object floating outside history. The Andean wall is no longer a riddle that requires a vanished superscience. The temple aligned with sunlight is no longer a code waiting to unlock all mysteries at once. Each monument returns to the world that made it to quarries, roads, chords, seasons, priests, rulers, workers, failures, corrections, hunger, ambition, and belief. And when that happens, the precision does not fade. It becomes heavier, because it is no longer the precision of fantasy. It is the precision of people. Ancient megastructures survive because they were made to outlast ordinary life, but they also survive by accident. Some endure because deserts protect them. Some because later builders found them too large to erase. Some because earthquakes tested them but did not break them. Some because jungles hid them from stone thieves for centuries. Others survive only in fragments, in foundation lines, in reused blocks, in the faint slope of an ancient canal, or in a roadbed visible for a moment when the light crosses the ground at the right angle. The evidence remains incomplete almost everywhere. What stands today is never the whole ancient world. It is only what time failed to consume. That incompleteness is part of their force. A finished monument can seem complete, but archaeology teaches the opposite. Every ruin is missing its sound. The shouted commands, the scrape of sledges, the ring of stone tools, the footsteps in a temple court, the water moving through a channel, the voices of apprentices learning by watching, all are gone. Paint has faded from surfaces that were once bright. Metal fittings have been removed. Sacred objects have disappeared. Wooden scaffolds and temporary ramps, often essential to construction, have vanished almost without trace. Many monuments now look pure and silent because the messy life around them has been erased. The precision remains, but the noise that produced it has fallen away. A lesser-known truth of ancient architecture is that many monuments were never meant to appear as bare stone. Temples, statues, pyramids, reliefs, and sacred buildings were often painted, plastered, polished, gilded, shaded by cloth, approached through smoke, music, crowds, offerings, and controlled movement. Modern ruins can look austere because they have been stripped by weather and history. The ancient viewer often saw colour, shine, and ceremony. Precision was not only measured by a surveyor's line, it was felt through the body a stair climbed at a deliberate pace, a doorway narrowing the world, a chamber darkening before a sudden shaft of light, a wall so finely fitted that the hand could travel across it without finding weakness. This is why the greatest ancient structures cannot be reduced to engineering alone, even when the engineering is brilliant. They were built inside worlds of meaning. In Egypt, stone could serve the transformation of a king and the renewal of cosmic order. In the Andes, walls could join sacred landscape, imperial command, and seismic intelligence. In Mesopotamia, raised platforms could lift divine presence above the city. In Rome, roads and aqueducts could make empire feel practical, inevitable, and public. In Maya cities, causeways, plazas, reservoirs, and temples could bind ritual time to political authority. Scholars still debate many details of meaning, sequence, and use. but the pattern is unmistakable. Precision mattered because order mattered. And order was never only beautiful, it was demanding. It required labour pulled from fields and households, specialists trained across years, administrators who could count and command, communities that accepted or endured obligation, and landscapes altered for purposes larger than one life. Ancient precision is therefore both inspiring and unsettling. It shows what human cooperation can accomplish, but it also shows how cooperation can be directed by hierarchy. Every fitted stone carries the possibility of pride and pressure together. A worker may have believed in the sacred purpose of the project. A worker may also have been exhausted by it. The same wall can preserve devotion, skill, duty, inequality, and genius in one surface. The modern world looks at these structures with its own contradictions. It has machines far stronger than ancient builders possessed. Yet it often lacks their patience. It has digital models, cranes, engines, and global supply chains. Yet it is still startled by what ropes, ramps, water, stone tools, careful observation, and long discipline could achieve. This surprise can be healthy when it becomes humility. It becomes harmful only when it turns into disbelief in the builders themselves. The stones do not ask us to invent impossible explanations. They ask us to expand our idea of what human beings can do when time, belief, skill, and necessity converge. The precision that remains is therefore not a solved puzzle so much as a surviving relationship. It connects the hand to the horizon, the quarry to the temple, the ruler to the labourer, the dead to the living, the earth to the sky. It reminds us that measurement is never merely technical. To measure is to care where something stands. To align is to believe that direction matters. To fit one stone exactly against another is to insist that the world can be made more ordered than it first appears. Ancient builders did this with tools that seemed simple, in societies that were often fragile, under rulers who are now mostly names, for gods whose temples are broken, and for futures they could not see. Yet the work reached that future. It reaches the present as a pressure in the mind. A person stands before a stone wall in the mountains, a pyramid in desert light, a ruined temple court, a causeway under forest, and feels both distance and kinship. The builders are gone, but their choices remain touchable. Their measurements still guide the eye, their errors, corrections, and ambitions still inhabit the material. The ancient world does not return fully, but it leaves enough to make silence eloquent. These megastructures were built with precision that can feel impossible, but their deepest message is not impossibility. It is endurance, the endurance of human attention made into stone. The day lowers over the ruins, and the hard edges soften. Stones that once carried commands, ceremonies, burdens, and prayers become shapes against the evening light. The crowds thin. The heat leaves the ground. Shadows gather in joints cut by hands that never knew the names of the centuries to come. Nothing moves quickly here. Time seems to slow around old walls, as if the monument is still teaching the pace that made it possible. There is comfort in that slowness. Ancient precision was not always sudden brilliance. More often, it was return. Return to the quarry. Return to the line. Return to the unfinished wall. Return to the horizon on the day when the sun reached the same place again. A civilization could vanish in war, drought, conquest, or forgetting, but the patient marks of its attention might remain, not whole, not perfectly understood, but present enough to remind later people that the past was never simple. The great stones do not explain everything. They do not give back the full voices of the builders, the private fears of the workers, the exact thoughts of the surveyor, or the first moment when a ruler imagined that a mountain, a temple, a road, or a sacred wall might outlive him. They leave fragments instead, a tool mark, a foundation, a slope that still drains rain, a shaft of light entering a chamber at the appointed time, a block fitted so carefully that even ruin cannot loosen its dignity. And perhaps that is why these places stay with us. They are not only records of strength, they are records of longing. Human beings wanted to make something firm in a world where almost nothing is firm. They wanted the dead remembered, the gods honoured, the seasons marked, the ruler magnified, the city fed, the road kept open, the sky brought down into architecture. They wanted, in their own ways, to leave a shape behind. Now the shape remains under weather and stars as sand moves around it, grass grows through it, birds rest on it, visitors pass beside it in full quiet for reasons they may not fully understand. The ancient builders are gone, but their patience has not completely vanished. It waits in the stone, in the measured line, in the old alignment between earth and sky, and in the stillness of a ruin holding the last warmth of the sun.